Okay, let's get going. Yesterday, we had a quick look at the Pesukim, at the verses which underlie the concept of Bikkurim, the concept of first fruits. We went through those verses. What we're going to do today is to go through the first two or maybe even three Mishnayot in the tractate. And we're going to see how they depend on those verses. And we're also going to try to answer some of the questions which were raised yesterday. We began on the first Mishnah yesterday. We looked at this Mishnah yesterday. Yesh mevi'im bikurim v'korin. There are some who bring bikurim and recite. Remember, we learned yesterday that there's a mitzvah not just to bring, but to recite. The declaration of the bikurim is it's the only tefillah which is actually mandated by Torah. That's perhaps why it's the centerpiece of the Haggadah. It's an incredibly important part of the. It's just an incredibly important part of the set of Sefer Devarim, and it's connected to bringing Bikurim. So there are some who bring and recite, and then Mevi'in Velokorin. There are some who bring and don't recite. V'yesh she'einam Mevi'in, and some people don't bring at all anyway. And kind of obviously, if they don't bring, obviously they're not going to recite. And now the Mishnah is going to start to break down these categories and try to explain why. Elu she'einan mev'in. These are people that just don't bring at all. They don't have to bring bikurim, even though they have got fruit to bring. Hanoter latoch shelo v'hivrich latoch shel yachid or shel rabim. Someone who plants on his own property. So he has a vine, for example, or a tree. The hivrich is a means to bend down or to make something bend down. And in this context, it means actually to bend down into the earth, i.e. to bury the shoot. It's a weird idea. We don't do that. I've never, ever seen anybody do this with agriculture today, but clearly it was a concept in the time of the Mishnah, and it's actually mentioned in the Mishnah of Shemitah. So we should have looked at it, but we kind of skipped over it a bit. But I brought you Maimonides, the Rambam, from that Mishnah of Shvi'it, and he actually explains what it is. Mavrichin, burying a shoot, he says, Lahashkif ha'ilan ba'aretz, to sink a tree into the ground, al orko, for its whole length, and replacing the earth above it so that many trees will sprout from it. You bury a branch in the earth, and then lots of other things will sprout from it. And I know it does exist today, even though I've never seen it, because I actually found a picture of it on the internet. So people are doing this today. And they're doing this as a method of propagation. You take a branch, you sink it into the ground, it runs some way in the ground, then it sprouts up some way away. And what you've done is you created a new cutting while using the plant energy from the roots of the old plant. So it's a way of creating a new cutting from the old tree, but without you could say more safely, more conservatively than actually cutting the branch off the old tree and putting it into water and rerouting it and so on, because the new shoot doesn't need initially to have new roots. It can use the old roots from the tree. It's called layering today. And the Hebrew is hivrich, and the Rambam explains it. And now we're going to try to understand what is going on here. So people who do not bring bikurim are people who've planted a vine in their own space, but they're burying a shoot into property belonging to another individual or to the public. So the shoot's coming up somewhere else. And similarly, if we take a shoot from someone else's private property and we make it shoot up in our own property, so we're going the opposite way around. We're going from his property or her property or public property into our own garden. We're creating a shoot in our own garden. Or, this is a really interesting case. You plant on your own property and you bury on your own property, but there's a private or a public road in between. And this does actually remind us of the picture we've got So maybe our two shoots are some way apart, and there's some public property, some public land between them. Maybe there's a little lane. Maybe we own two gardens and there's a little lane in between, and the shoot's going under the lane. And the Mishnah says, Hare ze eino mevi. This person does not bring. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, but we already know, right, from the Mishnah we've already learned that the halacha is not going to go according to Rabbi Yehuda. So we've got this really striking case of someone who doesn't bring, but at this point, we do not understand why not. We have the example, we understand the example, we can see the picture, but we don't understand why not. And we're going to jump into the second Mishnah. Second Mishnah must have originally been connected to the first one, because the second Mishnah explains, why doesn't he bring? And the Mishnah is going to quote a pasuk, one of the pasukim that we learned yesterday. Mishum shenemar, because of the verse, Reshit bikrei admatcha, the first fruits of your land. Ad sheyukol hagidulin me'at matcha, not unless all of their growth is from your land. You have to bring Bikkurim from your land. If it's coming from someone else's land, maybe because part of the tree is growing somewhere else, you don't bring Bikkurim. It has to be from your land. And along the same lines, sharecroppers, an aris is someone who basically rents land, but he pays a proportion of the crop in rent. So he's a kind of a partial owner. He's got a partial stake in the land. The chachorot are people who just rent for a fixed price. A sikarikon, this is a weird concept, the sikarikon. We don't have time to go into it I don't want to spend a lot of time on it now, but sikarikon is someone who, in the Roman times, managed to get hold of land by basically threatening to kill the owners. He essentially, it's a bit like Germany in the 1930s. He buys the land, but he buys it by saying to the owner, look, if you don't sell, I'm going to kill you. So, and the halacha rules, by the way, he doesn't really own the land. We can learn the halachas brought in Gittin, we'll learn it at some point. And a robber, gazlan, someone who steals. They don't bring. Ein miv'in. Mi oto hadam, from the same reason. Mishum she'namar reshit bikrei admat techa, the first fruits of your land. They have to be, it's got to be your first fruits and your land that you bring that you bring to Jerusalem. There's something about possession here. We go to Jerusalem, we say, Arami oved avi. My father was a wandering Aramean. My father was an immigrant. And yet, we say this in the knowledge that today the land is ours. So we were contrasting our ownership of the land now with the fact that, well, I suppose we could say, look, we nearly don't own it because we were immigrants once. And the Mishnah is then going to go on to say, look, we're ein mevi'in. Have we got? Yeah, we can just jump into one more Mishnah. Ein mevi'in bikurim chutz mishivat aminim. We only bring from the 7 species. And remember, the pasuk said mereshit bikurei admatcha. Let's go back to the pasuk. Reshit bikurei admatcha. The first fruits of your land. And we've learned this, by the way, in the halacha truma. Remember, we learned that you only bring the good stuff for truma. It's the same with bikurim. You only bring the good stuff. So we don't lo mitmarim shebeharim. We don't bring from dates grown on hills because the best dates are in the valleys, nor from fruits grown in the valley because fruit really grows well in the hills. Velo mizete, lo mizete, shemen she'einam minamuvcha, not from olives that are not choice. So we bring only the good stuff. And then ein mevi'in bikurei kodem la'atzeret. We don't bring bikurim before Shavuot. And we learned the pasuk. We learned the pasuk yesterday that Bikkurim are associated with Shavuot because they're mentioned in the the Pusukim about Shavuot. And in fact, there was a question yesterday about whether whether you could bring grain sort of after Pesach or after Shavuot. The new grain we can eat after Pesach or after the Omer sacrifices is brought. In other words, the 2 days after Pesach. But there is a pasuk in Vayikra in the Parsha of Emor, which mentions 2 loaves that we bring on Shavuot. These are chametz. This is the only chametz which is brought on the altar. This is all in the context of Shavuot. You shall bring 2 loaves of bread as a wave offering. Lechem tumor shtaim shnei esron. That's the quantity is 2 esronim. Solet tiena, fine meal. Chametz tiafana. You make them of chametz. You make them out of leaven. Bikkurim lashem. They are first fruits for God. There's something about Shavuot and bringing the loaves of bread which are associated with Shavuot. Bikkurim are Shavuot. And then the Mishnah brings this story. On Shehat Tzvoim, the people from Mount Tzvoim actually brought Bikkurim before Shavuot. V'lo kiblu mehem, the priests didn't accept them because it says in the Torah, we learned this verse yesterday, the festival of the harvest, Bikkurei Masecha, the first fruits of your labors, Asher Tizra Basadeh, which you've sown in the field. And again, you can see why, from the language of being sown in the field, you can see why we only bring from the 7 species which are sown in the field and which the land of Israel is praised for. So those are the first 3 Mishnayot of Bikkurim. And then tomorrow we will explore the rest of the Masechet and we'll just explore these concepts in more depth. And then with that, I'll stop recording and stop talking.